Vox and King Beau, Part 11, Beau and the Dream King. The topic lately seems to be dreams, so I'm gonna run with that. Going back, I remember Beau didn't always visit me during waking playtime. I would often dream about him at night, joining him on his adventures, or continuing out on our own. Maybe that's why the memories of these stories have blurred so much. Some parts are incredibly vivid, like I can see them perfectly in my mind's eye. Some of them barely make sense, and I can hardly figure out what's going on. At any rate, the next story is Beau and the Dreamcatchers. King Beau was fond of watching me sleep. He would rest his chin on my bed and grin with his mouth slightly open, teeth shining in the moonlight. I would talk to him for a time, but we had to whisper, because if Mom heard us, she would come in and fuss. One night, I told him that I hoped I had a good dream. He assured me I would.
I bring you dreams,
he said.
I can take any dream I like from the fields and bring it to you while you sleep.
I asked him how this was possible, and this is the story he told me. In his wandering, King Beau did not only come to our world to steal voices. There were a great many things to see all over, and lots of things to take for his own. On one particular journey, he found himself in the dream fields. These were not fields of the way we think them, with grass and flowers. This was a flat plain full of rolling mist that never dissolved. Within the mist, he could see little flashes, like tiny sparks of lightning inside of clouds. As he drew closer, the strikes projected images onto the mist, but only for a few short seconds. The scenes were only short clips of people flying, or animals or places. They were dreams. Beau was not alone in the fields. As he moved through the mist, he came upon a strange bunch of beings. They sat around on rocks or laid on the ground, staring up into the clouds. They had long pipes that they used to siphon the flashes as they appeared. They caught the dreams and ate them. Dreams are nothing. They have no value and no real substance. They're only lost thoughts, and the scum skimmed off the mind. At least, that's how Beau described them. Because of this, the Dreamcatchers' bodies were always searching for more, even if their mind craved nothing but the sweet dreams. They had tendrils growing out of every pore in their skin, roots always searching for more to sustain them. Anything that happened into the fields was fair game for their thirsty, piercing tentacles. Beau, as always, was not afraid of any catcher or dream. He moved into the field because there was no way around it, and he definitely wasn't going back after reaching such an interesting place. Unfortunately, the roots of the catchers began to take notice of him, and soon even the catchers themselves couldn't resist grabbing at his cloaks and trying to drag him down to the ground for themselves. The catchers had no teeth because all they did was suck at the pipes. Their eyes were huge and their noses looked more like beaks. Beau tried to fight them, but unlike the faces in the closet beast cave, the catchers weren't rooted down. They overwhelmed him with the numbers. Beau stole one of the pipes and tried to keep them at bay, but the tendrils were too small and dug into his flesh. But when the beings had all but dragged him into the plain, a deep horn bellowed. The catchers froze and then moved away, as if Beau had suddenly become poisonous. When they had moved from his sight, he noticed a young warrior on a pale steed.
"You disturbed the catchers,"
the warrior said.
They disturbed me first,
said Beau.
I was only trying to pass.
"You must earn passage through my kingdom,"
the warrior replied.
"I will help you. I can see that you're a friend of the moon."
Beau walked with the warrior through the field. As long as he remained near the other, the catchers ignored him and went back to siphoning the dreams. The warrior had youthful features and a slightly delicate appearance. He seemed just as sedate as the others around him. Though Beau was beginning to suspect, The mist had something to do with that. The warrior shone slightly, as though the swirling clouds made him glow, and he was made of silver and pale blue.
The moon is my sister,
the warrior said.
I look after the dreams. My people make them, and we send them out to the sleeping ones on the other side.
But you let the catchers eat them?
Beau asked. The warrior only shrugged.
It is their nature. I can't stop them.
Beau sneered because he thought this was foolish.
I am the king of the quiet place. No one may take what is mine. I will eat their voices and wear their skins.
Then you can help me,
the Dream King said. The Dream King took Beau to a great tower made of polished stone as smooth as ice. They climbed up the tower to the king's chamber, where they stood and looked over the vast fields. The mist spread as far as the eye could see, and there were more than just catchers within it. There were threads of deep rivers and strange creatures bounding along in herds. But to the west, the mist grew dark. The dream flashes were angrier and more agitated. The bodies of the catchers lay on the ground, being picked apart by strange bird-like monsters. These odd vultures clawed at and cleaned the dead bodies away, picking for any last shreds.
Watch,
the Dream King said, and pointed to the edge of the dark, ruined land. One of the bird monsters was eyeing a catcher, and the catcher only focused on consuming another dream. The monster took flight and circled the catcher, surveying the situation before diving down and attacking. It gouged out the catcher's eyes with its talons and used its strange mouth to tear out a cheek. The catcher's tendrils immediately tried to attack, but for some reason, they couldn't get purchase.
It's the feathers,
the king explained.
They're too oily. The tendrils slip off.
The cries of the catcher drew more of the monsters. Soon, the form did nothing but twitch and jump as dozens of the creatures ripped at dead flesh. Around the catcher, the land cracked and grew mottled with the same infection that plagued the other side of the mist. The other catchers did nothing to help their fallen friend or save themselves. They were too busy with the dreams.
My brother's made a pact with the darkness. He wants to infect the dreams and send the darkness into the sleeping ones. His nightmares will destroy my fields. I have no armies of my own. I cannot stop him as long as he controls the worms.
Those are not worms,
Beau replied.
Not them.
The king assured him.
They feed on the worms.
When he first came to the dream fields, Beau had thought it would be easy to pass. The Dream King's problems was none of his concern. The darkness had never been a friend of the quiet place. However, a part of the moon was still in his heart, and this small part of him would never allow Beau to simply leave this place for the darkness to swallow, so he agreed to help the king. Beau was very smart, and he knew much about the worms.
There is only one worm, even if there are many.
He assures the king.
We will kill the worm.
Though Beau was not afraid of anything, he was also no fool. To travel through the mist was to make himself food for the thousands of bird monsters that searched in flocks for more food. Not to mention the catchers would certainly try to eat him. Being as smart as he was, he decided two things. First, the Dream King would go with him, because this was all his fault. Second, that they would travel to the worm through the worm tunnels. It only made sense. The Dream King was not very happy with either of these ideas, and made a fuss over getting his fine clothes dirty. But Beau didn't care one bit. The Dream King took him to an opening in the ground, where the cracks of the plague land joined together. All around the hole were the skeletons of the catchers, and their long-forgotten pipes. but the bird monsters had long since abandoned the area in favor of more fertile hunting grounds. With the king's bow, and Beau's knives and voices, and quickness and strength, and many other warrior skills, they armed themselves and set out. The network of tunnels was winding, and often they had to crawl through tight spots or dug out cave-ins. The king used light borrowed from his sister the moon to guide their way. It bounced along the tunnel's walls and burned at the trails of any smaller worms that might have troubled them. Finally, they came to a wide, cavernous chamber. It was lit with black flames and covered in the same polished stone as the king's tower. Inside was a young warrior that looked very much like the Dream King, but his features were golden and midnight. Coiled up and bloated, with a twisted, sightless face, was the worm. It oozed and pulsed, and while they watched, the warrior took a knife and carved out a slice from its flesh. The slices fell to the floor and pulsed. Before their eyes, 2 more small worms had been created.
You see, King,
said Beau.
there is only one worm.
That said, he attacked. Of course, the Nightmare King was not going to let Beau simply kill his prized worm. He let out a fierce cry, and the 2 smaller worms came straight for him. In their wake, they left a trail of poisonous ooze that bubbled and ate away at the polished stone. Their maws opened wide and stretched out hungrily for the 2 kings. The Dream King was quick to pierce one with an arrow, pinning it down and burning its flesh with thick, sizzling smoke. Beau dodged the other and let loose one of his piercing voices, which froze the little worm in its track and made it curl up into a withering ball. The Dream King readied another arrow and charged at the great worm. The monster rose up and tried to coil around the king, hissing as the arrows dug into it, but never faltering from its battle. While the king was focused on saving his kingdom, Beau would pay more attention to the things that mattered. And what mattered more than anything to the Nightmare King was protecting a stone hanging around his neck. Beau knew this because he was a mighty hunter, and hunters can see how one protects a prize. That, Beau decided, was his target. While the Dream King kept the worm busy, Beau went after the Nightmare King.
I do not care why you help the darkness,
Beau said as his knives flashed and sparked against the Dark One's sword.
I do not care that you too are a brother of the moon. That stone is mine. I will have it.
The Nightmare King was a great warrior, very fast, even though his size was small. But desperation made him stumble and alter his normal patterns to protect the stone, and this was something Beau knew well. He threw 2 voices into the Dark One's ears, confusing his senses and disrupting his balance. With the window of opportunity, Beau snatched the stone away. The great worm froze.
I can make the worm eat your brother,
Beau told the Dream King. The Nightmare King realized that he had lost and could not escape, so he did not try.
No,
Sighed the Dream King.
it is their nature.
Normally, Beau would have done it anyway. But again, the bit of the moon that still inhabited his heart made him send the great worm away, back to its homeland, never to return to the dream fields. Beau kept the worm's heart for himself, and the Nightmare King also returned to his own tower, beaten at least for a time. However, Beau was not finished. It angered him that the Dream King and the Catchers did nothing to defend themselves. He hated that the Catchers took without repaying their debts. So he stood atop the Dream King's tower and roared in a voice so mighty that even the mist trembled and the dreams silenced for a time.
Listen to me!
For once, the Catchers listened.
You can only take these dreams. You must have a purpose. Look!
He pointed to one of the bird monsters, circling the mist, looking for any last worms and eyeing the catchers.
Fight!
Beau ordered, and one of the catchers thrust his pipe up. It speared into the chest of the bird monster, and what oozed down was just as sweet as a dream. From then on, the Dream King had an army, and Beau was allowed to take whatever dreams he wished in return for his help. And that is why I only had good dreams.